Hello and welcome to the Consolation League. I'm one of your hosts, Scott,
And I'm Paul.
and today we are honored to have a Scotsman on the show. A big shout out to everybody listening in Scotland. We've got some big fans in the Carluke area, so hello and
Yep.
welcome to the show. And we've got Dave with us today from the Other Guys 40K podcast. Thanks very much for joining us.
Oh no, thank you very much for having me. It's something of a tradition at this point that Brian always kind of finishes first, and I always come a bit later. So it seems to be a fitting continuation of the podcast adventures at this point. I
Yeah.
actually, before we could, I have a funny story actually related
Go
to
on.
that. Someone messaged me the other day, specifically about Brian, and it said something along the lines of well, on every podcast, someone's got to be good at Warhammer and someone's got to be funny. And I didn't like that implication. So fight amongst yourselves and
Yeah.
pick who's who.
Yeah, right. Like try and figure out
Yeah.
the
Between the two of
golden
you, one's
ticket guy or that's unkind. That's unkind.
That's
I was like, oh
offside.
well. Yeah. Oh well.
No,
You're
no.
living.
Block
At least
that
I'm funny.
comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who is that? How dare
Yeah.
they?
Well, that's
No,
that that said, Brian was the very first to say on the show that you could wipe the floor with him with some of his lists. Like
absolutely.
your Votan
Oh.
was cleaning up, your Grey Knights clean up. Like he had a lot of great things to say about your play style and everything like that. So let's maybe start with that. Let's talk a little bit about how you play because we were just chatting before the show. And you've got an
Mhm.
interesting take on Warhammer 40K and how you
Yeah.
approach everything. So let's hear about that maybe.
Yeah, so it's kind of it's a bit of interesting pathing, really, because I think we'll talk about this a little bit later. But when I really
Mhm.
got into competitive, I was playing ninth edition Votan, which some people who are listening will remember that, and maybe yourselves do a little bit.
Yeah.
They were just lethal. They didn't die, and anything they saw died. So it was this very like you just hammered people if they dared to be in the open. And I liked that, that's kind of fun, right? But I would also
Mhm.
lose a bunch of games because I scored no points. And then when
Mhm.
Votan were terrible, I
Mhm.
suddenly entered this situation of like, okay, I just need to score as many points as humanly possible. It doesn't matter if I kill a single sausage. I must score points. And so yeah, a lot of my lists really started at that point in time, just being like, how do I used to take a little E-champ, he's like on a 40 mil base, and I would do deploying behind with Votan, a famously very slow army. Most of them are kind of
Mhm.
move
Yeah.
5. The bikes are pretty speedy, but that's about it. And I'm saying famously slow. Everyone's scout 6 or 9, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
It's like
apart from that, but no, and I used to take deploying behind. People kind of look at me like I'd sort of like my beard was on fire,
Right.
and but it was just a case of like, well, if I can get the bikes there and deploy at the time was 3 points for the middle. So as long as I
Mhm.
can get something back there turn one, and then I'll do it in the middle, then something there, and then middle, and then eventually I can start throwing because coming back to deal with, I used to give him an enhancement, so he stood up. Coming back to deal with something like
Mhm.
Yep.
that is bloody annoying.
Yep.
At the time, I was also just playing Brian a ton. Brian was playing like CSM, World Eaters, Orcs, and he was kind of early 10th was him trying to find his niche. And I don't know if kind of Brian chatted about this. I tend to, I will paint an army for an entire year and then I will play an army for an entire year. I
Okay.
won't move.
Okay.
I won't move off of it. I won't change. It's just
Oh,
that is
okay,
the army for the
cool.
year. And it
Interesting.
often means you're never, to me anyway, if you paint something for a year, you're never
Mhm.
scrambling. Like there's never been a point with Grey Knights where I've been like, ah shit, like I don't have this unit or that unit, or I
Right.
have them because I've spent a year painting them, right?
Right.
And then I get a year to play it. And Brian was kind of obviously Brian really likes being a bit kind of experimental with his factions. He's a good player, he has the kind of competence to do that. I barely have the competence to play one, right? So
Mhm.
I'm playing against Brian. He's playing these kind of multiple factions, and it was really an exercise in like, oh god, like these could all just because Vogtan at launch were terrible,
They were
like
bad,
10th
yeah.
launch.
Mhm.
Yep.
And I was like, how do I win these games? So yeah, that's kind of it where it started with that. And then as we were talking about earlier, I'm something of a 40k pacifist. Like I don't really enjoy killing things. It takes up too much
Yeah.
time. You've got to roll all these dice, and people are using
Yeah.
stratagems, and they talk about command point. I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah.
Just roll them. Oh, is it dead? Never mind. I'm not going near it. You stay on your side. I'll stay on my side. Neither of us go in the middle. See what happens. Could
Everything
be
will
a-
be fine.
That'll be fine. So yeah, but again, I can't reiterate enough. It was just that sort of I've never seen it or read it, but I'm led to believe there's a part in the Lord of the Rings, something about the fires of Mount fucking Doom or something.
Doom or
And there we
something.
go.
Yeah.
See, Doom,
Yeah.
Mount Doom.
Yeah.
And it was that like forged in the fires of kind of Mount Doom was this idiotic play style from just getting obliterated by Brian
Yeah.
for like 6 months. Was just okay. I will score 1,000 points, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm tabled. I don't care. But no, it's unique. I think a lot of people get into this because they like kind of smashing the
Yeah.
sort of toys together, and I don't. It's
Yeah.
not for me.
Because I mean, that's one of the things I think Scott and I've always struggled with our play style. We have no style. We just play haphazardly. But we've always been the type of players who's like, okay, I've spent this money, I've built this model, I've painted it, it looks great, and I want to see the damage it can do, as
Yeah.
opposed to, okay, how does it actually play? What does it do for me? And I'm finally starting to try and work that out.
Yeah.
It's not going well, but I'm having a lot of fun while I try and figure it
This is it.
out.
Yeah, you
But
don't have to solve it immediately. That's kind of the
I
fun
don't
of
have
this,
to
right?
solve exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I don't think I'll ever solve it, but having said that, I'm having a great time going along the way. So it is interesting to hear about like the strategy behind um, that approach. And for the first thing I think of, so did you tailor your Grey Knights list to this scoring philosophy because of what that faction does? Or would you do that with any list, any army?
That's a really cool question. No, so when did 10th go live? July, sort of
Yeah.
July last year?
last year, I want to
A
say.
year?
Yeah.
So
Year and
from late August, I would say actually. So yeah, late August on until 3 4 weeks ago. I've only played fixed. I've never done tactical.
Mhm,
I know what the cards do in my
mhm,
sort of position, helping Carlos with TOing, but
mhm.
I don't use them. There's a lot of randomization in there. I don't like drawing cards and it telling me to kill stuff. Um, so so
It kind of goes
any
against
list for me,
Yeah, your
yeah,
philosophy,
exactly,
it
right?
doesn't agree with
Yeah,
your conscientious objector. It doesn't work.
that's exactly. So it always starts from a position of which fixed objectives can I score and how can I accomplish that.
Okay.
So we always start with like deploying or sorry, locus.
Yep.
If you're
Established locus.
if
Yep.
you're a purist, yeah, if you're living La Vida locus, we start
Yeah.
there. Because locus and behind, if you do it with one thing, is 7 points, right? So if we do that five
Right.
times, you're on 35 points. You cannot go broke making a profit. If you look at your kind of average secondary points scored from tactical over the last X amount of games, you're probably sitting in like the high 20s, low 30s. So 35,
Right.
you've kind of already naturally got a primary advantage, provided you can do that every round. And if I can't do that, it then becomes, do I have enough throwaway trash to do cleanse and deploy or cleanse and
Okay.
locus?
Right.
And then, engage is always a bit of a trap.
Mhm.
My implication of engage is if you can score engage for 4 points, i.e., you're in all four quarters, then
Mhm.
you can also score behind. And that's just 3 points
Yep.
for one unit. Just do that instead.
Mhm.
And then obviously there's a lot of the combat focus ones, bring it down, assassination and
Mhm.
those kind of things, call the horde. That's some of the kind of necessary. I've taken cull and assassination with my Grey Knights before. I'm not proud of it.
Right.
But it's my win condition is already I'm going to have to deal with these horde units.
Right.
I might as well
Mhm.
score points for doing it, right?
Mhm.
Don't want is I've got a sort of a cursed cultist brick in my face and I draw, I don't know, cleanse or containment.
Yeah.
Like, oh, bugger it. I need to fight this thing. So I might as well get
Mhm.
points for doing that. So yeah, the list design stage, regardless of faction, always really starts at that fixed perspective, and then we
Okay.
just walk it back step by step. So like I'm painting Eldar just now, for example,
Mhm.
and we're starting there with them. Does it really work for them in my
No.
experience? But we'll see how that goes. I mean, it's how like there's that kind of turn phrase. I don't know if it's a turn of phrase, but the concept that like iron sharpens iron, and
Right.
it's if it wasn't for the fact that I'm constantly playing like Brian, Carlos, like these like to me quite high level players.
Mhm.
I like there's no need to like improve your like if I could just do what I do and be like, oh, I just draw cards and I roll my dice and things die.
Yep.
Ah, but like you're playing these guys and they're racking up scores, and you're just
Mhm.
kind of like, I need to get a move on here, or I'm going to be
Hmm.
left behind. Um,
Right.
yeah,
I
Yeah.
find that's
So
that's
that's
typically where I get stuck when I'm playing the game, is that all of a sudden I realize like, oh shit, this person seems to be really edging further and further ahead, and I'm scrambling just to make whatever points I can right now. So like that's where I get stuck with, okay, how exactly should I be strategizing? How exactly should I be playing? What is my
mm,
response? And do I have the army that I can actually do that or
yeah,
not? And am I getting wrapped in the idea of making my army do something that it's not designed to do?
mhm.
I get that. No, I hear that.
Yeah. So you're a fixed player. You prefer that over the tactical,
I prefer knowing what it is I have to do. Yeah.
right?
It
Yeah.
allows me to, because you'll find. Don't get me wrong, my army
Mhm.
teleports, right? So that's a
Yeah.
nice advantage to have.
Yeah.
Huge
But
advantage.
Yeah.
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 um,
Just a little.
I have no idea how people do it, where they're staging to attack the middle of the board, the center objective.
Mhm.
They want to knock your primary, and then they draw like, what's the one we have?
Sabotage.
Like they draw containment and recover assets. Okay,
Right.
now you need to find the economy in your army to do 5 actions now,
Yeah.
and get to those edges of the
Right.
board, and get to 3 separate areas of the board, and you still need to knock this thing off primary, or they're going to score 5 points. So
That's
what's the move here? Like, what are you going to do?
Mhm.
Whereas, yeah, like I will keep referring to Locus and Behind just because I've done it so often.
Yeah.
Locus and Behind is just fit a base somewhere in there, and it
Mhm.
it scores you 7 points. Like um, is it massively efficient across the entire game? No, there are elements of singles where you run into troubles.
mhm.
Unfortunately, the prevalence of uppy downy, as much as that
Yeah.
moniker really drives me up the wall, um, the prevalence of that is just like GW when they're writing books just throw a dart and they're like
Mhm.
give them that, and it
Yeah.
seems to keep it seems to keep being
Yeah.
uppy downy. But the prevalence of that now means that that knocking that out of the game has become such a mainstay of a lot of factions. If you have infiltrators where you're obviously taking a squad because they can just block out
Mhm.
a whole DZ. If you're taking like I think there's one in guard that gives a 12-inch deep strike denial. There's like a
Yes.
couple of
Yeah.
enhancements here and
Mhm.
there.
I think there's an
Um,
assassin that does it,
yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
Cypher does it, and
You
there's
just end up in
there's
a
a few of them.
situation. You just end up in a situation where you can't actually get in there unless you can walk in. Now, there's ways to play around that.
Mhm.
Like interceptors in Grey Knights, they move 12 inches, auto advance
Mhm.
6, and they can shoot and scoot for free
Mhm.
or for 1 CP. So you're moving 4 inches in one turn, kind of nasty.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's your behind. But
Yeah.
outside, it's yeah, trying to find ways to factor in that fixed is what I like. I prefer.
That's
Again,
cool.
just the simple fact of it is I like knowing what I need to do. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, that for certainly for me, like that when you talk about those card draws and you're like, well, here I am, and yeah, now all of a sudden I have to do 5 actions
Yeah.
with sometimes really expensive units that I want to do shooting and not actions
Mhm.
because I need to thin out the opponent a bit, and so I find myself in that position quite a lot. The last tournament there, Ruin and Devastation, I was like literally I didn't deploy well and I moved things and I was like, oh man, now I've got to do what? I
Yeah.
can't do recover assets. I'm like, I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
oh, what have I done? It's just, but like, I just like getting out and I'm like a Labrador. I'm just happy to be outside. So, but that's
oh,
good. That gives me a lot to think about because like
Yeah.
right now I'm running two things you brought up that really have stuck with me already because I'm someone who got into this in ninth, started collecting and doing the hobbying side, and then finally learned the rules when I got into heresy, and then that helped me leapfrog in back into like 40K.
yeah.
And because I have all this mix mash of armies, I like your paint your 2,000 points or paint your army and then play that army. I
Mhm.
really dig that because that will help keep my hobby motivation up and learn rules instead of trying to juggle rules over, a handful of armies
Mm.
and trying to figure it out and make it work. So I
Yeah.
really like that. And
One
then
of
Yeah.
the
this whole fix thing,
mm.
maybe that'll help a less experienced player like myself
Mhm.
keep it simple. Like, in my work, I'm always trying to do the keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's just so it's really, not to say it's not that it's a stupid way of approaching it or
Mm.
like simple, but for me, certainly if I only have to remember how to do two things,
Yeah.
that's in Warhammer, that's going to help me a lot as someone who constantly forgets what things do and how to achieve things, and
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think
ultimately,
that's
ultimately, it's a very simple game, right? It's stand on
yeah,
circle and do thing. Um,
yeah,
and as long as you remember to stand on circle and do thing, you're gonna do okay.
hmm
It takes and it's weird. It takes a long time to learn stand on circle. Some people get that
yeah,
way quicker than others.
yeah.
Like I know
Still
Brian did.
struggling.
Not me.
Uh, yeah,
Slow learner. A real slow learner.
Slow learners here.
he's got
A
he's got
couple
circle
short bus
allergy.
kids. Yeah,
But yeah, the
yeah,
other, I mean, the painting for a year, playing for a year thing as well, really came in clutch. I mean, I think my, obviously we'll kind of chat about
sure.
how I started and all the rest of it, but
Yeah,
the most accelerated period of my improvement, personally that I saw was when Votan were at their very worst at the start of 10th,
mm,
because I'd committed. I'm playing this army for a year and I will not change no matter what. And I think I had like Brian, Carlos, my buddy Chris Crook, like a few other
mm,
buddies, just being like, dude, change.
right.
Like this is miserable. Like they would play me, and like I would just get hammered, and they were
hmm
like, "You're not playing badly. There's just nothing you can do." And it's
hmm
like, "Nope. Like I'm determined. I will get blood from this
Yep.
stone," And that was the biggest period of my improvement was during that time because I was like, "It doesn't. I'm not pivoting. I don't care. I'm
Yeah.
not changing faction." And that was what taught me a lot because it was like, how can you get blood from this stone? And
Yeah.
it's every lesson I learned from that kind of 6 month period translated to every other army or faction I've played since then.
I
Because you
dig it.
just you just learn a lot more about how to like play smart, where to
Yeah.
hide, where
hmm
to stage, how to like kind of build your list, maximize that score, and just think about like, okay, well I'm bringing three T12 hecatons, but if I get parking lot escape, and on
hmm
these maps it gets a bit weird, and where can I hide, and where can I see stuff, and it was ultimately quite frustrating to be honest. I think Brian tells this story. There's a point where we went to CTC, Canadian Tabletop Championship,
Yeah.
and I went 3-3, and this was when Votan were at the very start when they were pretty abhorrent.
hmm
And I went 3-3, and the stat check published the stats for Votan on that Monday,
hmm
and I boosted the Votan win rate globally by 15%. I think they had something like 14 wins globally,
Yeah.
like 14 wins and 38 losses, and I was like, that was
That
this
was you.
That's
that
this
was
That's
this
guy.
this guy. Yeah.
this moron over here. There was no
That's
one was
amazing.
playing it. People were just
Yeah.
like, put this in the bin, like throw
Yeah.
it out. So no, it was that was kind of the period of my sort of biggest improvement was definitely just sticking to it through thick and thin.
Yeah.
That's
I,
Hard,
I
encouraging because I was
easy
I
to
was
say.
I remember listening to the podcast and you would be talking about
mhm.
your plays with Votan and everything like that. And I kept thinking, why is he playing Votan right now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, it wasn't just you.
but it's made me think like in all honesty, this isn't
Yeah,
just like blowing smoke or anything. When I decided to start playing Votan again now, I know they're in a different stage right now
yeah,
and
yeah, of course.
they've got a bit of a resurgence, but I was like, to hell with it. Dave was playing Votan when they were bad, and he really
Mm.
enjoyed playing them, and he made that army work. I like the army. I want to see it work. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna try and grind and see what I can do.
I
I'm
like
not
the
good,
army
but I'm gonna
is
do
here.
it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like the army is always here.
Yeah.
Success, scores, factions, data sheet comes here. I like
Mhm.
the army always wins for me. If you think the thing's cool, run the thing. Do that. Like
Yeah.
if you're a skilled player and a factionalist and whatever else it may be, it's always going to triumph the dude hopping on the latest thing. So
Yeah.
just like be that guy. Be that guy that's like, yeah, this is I play this. Like I don't give a
Yeah.
shit if you think it's good, bad, in between, or Australian. This is what I
Mhm.
play.
Mhm.
Nice. Nice. I think that does segue kind of nicely into you telling us a little bit about how you got into the hobby, what your first armies might have been, and where where you went from there.
Oh no.
Um,
Oh God. This is going to be a this is going to be a terrible look at my fiscal irresponsibility.
No. You're amongst friends here.
Thanks, lads.
You're
thanks.
talking to a couple of fiscally irresponsible guys here.
What
Impulse
is-
buyers for the
Yeah.
plastic crack. Absolutely.
We mentioned that we started off with the hobby first.
Yeah.
And then started playing. Like, obviously, we're not fiscally responsible.
That's the move. So I still am very kind of into board games, and I have been for quite a long period of time. Pardon me, because I am about to burp, and I'm going to mute myself. That was utterly vulgar. They're going to see that on YouTube. Oh, bugger. But I always kind of collected board games, and obviously when you're younger, you see Warhammer, but I remember picking up a box of it and being like, Jesus Christ, that's £20, and then flipping it over and being like, how did they fit all these painted models inside this box?
Yeah.
And the guy in the shop was like, no, they don't come painted. I was like, you mean this is just full of unpainted miniatures? He's like, no, you have to build them as well. Oh, stick that up your ass. Yeah. I'm going to buy a video game. This is absolute nonsense.
I have to build my own toy and paint it? Are you insane?
Not doing that. And so this would be, I think, as a lot of people's story about the hobby kind of begins now, is sort of during the pandemic, I was ousted from Canada. It was rubbish. I was meant to fly out on the 17th of April, and on the 23rd of March, they phoned me and said, your flight's in 5 days. Either you get on it or you're humped. And so I had to just store an apartment in 5. I'm in Toronto, just like, anybody want a couch? Like, why? I don't know, right? I need rid of it, right?
Yeah.
So I moved home, and I was there for a wee bit. And whilst I was there, we were playing Blood Bowl, because we were in the house. There was nothing we could do. So we played Blood Bowl online. And a few of us were like, we could play this on the tabletop. It'd be great. And I one of my friends is an excellent painter, Will Brown, Elysian Minis on Instagram. He'll care about that. He loves it. Plug. But he what do you call it? He's an excellent painter. And I remember, I know kind of comparison's the thief of joy, but for me, unless I'm instantly very good at something, I don't like to. If it wasn't for the fact that I was good at rugby the first time I did it, I never would have continued that, and I played it for like 22 years. But if I was crap the first time, I just would have never did it. So I bought a Blood Bowl kit and I painted it, and my friends and I played 1 or 2 games, and then it got shelved for like 6 months, 8 months. We never touched it. And I turned up at Will's, and it was this kind of unceremonious. Like, I turned up, I was like, here's all my paints. I don't want it anymore. Take it. I'm done with it. And then about 3 or 4 months later, the new Kill Team box was coming out. And my friend and I were like, we should get this. I can paint. I swear to God, I can paint a box of minis. So we got it and we played it. And I don't know if you've played the old Kill Team, but it was absolutely terrible. It was so shite. People are going to come for me because they like that game, but it was, oh my God, it was terrible. And but we played it. My friend Ross and I kind of went halfers on a box, and we played it, and it was fine. It was whatever it was. But it was painting those 10 guys. I was like, I could paint an army. Like, I could do this. I could definitely do this. And around about the same time, a chap put out a chap by the name of Mediocre Hobbies, an Irish guy, put out a video game like, here's how to speed paint an orc army. And I was like, I could do that. Like, I was like, I've got, sort of spatulas for hands, but I could paint that. So I went and bought the paints and bought the primer and did the thing. And I thought, well, I'm going to move to Canada. I'm going to be unemployed. It was like a month of unemployment before my job kicked in. I've got a month. I could paint an army in a month. Spoiler alert, by the way. I did not finish that off. I did not finish that orc army. But this would have been sort of November 21 was when this project kind of kicked off. And I painted sort of about 1,800 points, 1,500 points of orcs, and I thought, Gene Stealer cults. Now that's an army for me. That's my army. So I painted about 2,500 points of that. And me and Brian were playing, and my buddy Watsy and I were playing at the time. And we're playing these little friendly games. I've got tons of photos. I've got an album called Warhammer Through the Ages. And it's just full of Brian and I playing at these fucking weird tournaments. And there's like a few in my basement of us using Pringle cans for terrain. And your line of sight would change if someone wanted a Pringle. Which was terrible. You'd all of a sudden be in the open. Like, what happened? Oh, I wanted the salt and vinegar. Like, oh, fuck. Okay, great. Guess I get a shot now. And we... we would play those kind of things, and it was great. And around about that time, I think Brian got kind of into competitive, and I was just mad into the hobby. Loved painting, just was delighted. Anytime something looked better, even slightly than the last thing I painted, the overall model didn't need to look better. It just had to be a little piece of it had to look better.
Right,
I would go,
nice.
oh, that's brilliant. So if I can do
Technique,
that piece,
just-
yeah, if I can do that bit and that bit and that bit and that bit and combine, oh, it's going to look brilliant next mini. So we'd do that. And he said, you need to come along to this tournament. And I thought, okay, like I'm reasonably competent. Like I know my data sheets. I know what I'm doing. I'll give this a shot. And it was miserable. It was absolutely miserable. And I say that not with no shadow of jest. I appreciate it does sound humorous, but
Yeah.
I went along and I just had such a shite time.
Yeah.
It was around about the time when Critical Hit was entering kind of a relatively transitional period. Some of the old heads who weren't particularly pleasant who have now since left, by the way. And I'd like to preface this by saying Crit Hit is a wonderful space. I like playing there now. I love all the guys that play there, and I'd happily go to a tournament there any day of the week. But at the time, sort of 3 years ago, not quite the same vibe, shall we say.
Okay.
So I played 3 games. All 3 of them were the first one was lovely. The next 2 were relatively unpleasant.
Okay.
And you can actually check, well, my BCP's somewhere. And then I didn't play again for a year. I just stopped. It's like, this is miserable. I'm not doing this.
Oh.
And I stopped, didn't play for about a year. Continued to paint armies. So in that time, I painted, 2,500 points of Necrons, 2 and a bit thousand points of Age of Sigmar. Oh no, 4,500 points of Skaven. I subsequently sold those. The list is going to keep going, Scott. So don't fucking react quite yet, right? The list gets longer.
Keep going.
You didn't pick small armies. You picked like 2,000 points of these things is a lot of models.
A lot of models.
I had 180 clan rats, all fully painted and based and magnetized. It was hell.
Amazing.
And I don't own it anymore. They're gone.
Yeah, that's the worst part.
They're in Alberta now with some freak. I've also painted and sold it. I've also painted and sold about 2.5k of Necrons twice. The exact same army twice. Painted it, went, this is shit. Sold it, did it again. Anyway, so I didn't play for about a year. And then Votann came out. And I thought, well, how many times in 40k do you get the opportunity to start a faction from the ground up? You're not going on Google and, best Votann list, and they're going, here's what you run. And if you don't run this, you're a dickhead. Because I was looking up GSC lists and they were like, take 18 bikes. It's like, I fucking hate bikes. No, take bikes. And so Votann came out and I thought, right, Votann it is. I'm going to get into Votann. And then, of course, it comes out that they're a nightmare and they're broken and all the rest of it. And they were very strong if they shot you. But I used to just get hammered because they only moved 5 inches. And I remember playing Ridvin, or Scary, if you want to use his kind of internet name, which is still very unusual. And I only moved 5 inches. And so he just took a tape measure and went, so turn 2, you'll be here. Turn 3, you'll be here. Turn 4, you'll be here. And turn 5, you'll be here. And at no point will I be visible on any of those lines on each of those turns. I was like, well, I guess I'm humped then, eh? Nothing I can really do about that.
This is a great game. I'm glad.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that was that kind of period of time. But what I will say is there's 2 big factors here, and I'll do the first one because the first one's kind of boring. If it wasn't for Votann, I wouldn't have learned how to play the game at all, because it wasn't that Votann were super strong. It was that Votann could take a punch. So I could take a punch and keep learning. Oh, okay, I fucked up. I shouldn't have gone there, but I can learn from that and do things. Whereas Genestealer Cults, I would just get sort of leaf blower turn 1. And this was still in the days of player place terrain, which was abhorrent. But with Votann, I could get hit and I knew, that's not right. No, I shouldn't do that. I can learn from that. And so they allowed me to kind of learn the game a bit better. But the other much more important factor of this, for competitive at least, is Brian. There's no other 2 ways about it. If it wasn't for Brian just being kind of constantly motivating this great guy that he was, asking, what did you paint lately? That looks great. Like, do you want a wee game kind of thing? If it wasn't for him doing that, I would not be playing this game now. It's even at the kind of points where I sort of fall out of love with it a little bit, he's constantly there kind of chiming, look, have a wee game, or what are you thinking about the game? Just asking for opinions and things like that, or showing me the things he's painting. And I think, without a shadow of a doubt, if it wasn't for the fact that he's kind of been such a close friend throughout all of this,
Mhm.
I wouldn't continue playing this game
Wow.
without a shadow of a doubt. And then I won a couple of games as
Mhm.
Votan, and I thought, yeehaw.
Yeah, here we go.
Here we go. This makes
Yeah.
sense to me. Around about the time I painted 2,500 points of Black Templars on us, and Brian has that now. I'll just keep chiming in with the armies I've painted as we go.
Go on. Yeah,
It's not
go
going to
on.
be good. So then this is when I met Carlos, and this is how I started TOing because Thousand Suns were a really bad matchup for Votan. And I'd met Carlos randomly through some friends. I knew he played T-Sun. So I asked for a game. And obviously, I'd played Brian, who was very kind of unga bunga up the board, punch you in the chops and score a bunch of points. And I was like, oh, Jesus, what just happened to me? And I played Carlos, and he had this very kind of, I think it's where my passivity was born from, because he's much better at it than I am. Or he was. Now he plays Town, he just fucking shoots
He
you.
shoots you off the table.
You're like,
Yeah.
oh, God, well, I had 2,000 points of stuff. And he's like, well, now you don't. You're like, oh, God. But at the time, he was playing T-Suns, and he would kind of just do this banners and warp ritual thing where he would send a guy out, do warp ritual, and then pull that guy back behind the wall. And you'd be like, how did I get over there? And he's like, well, you only move 5, so you never get over here. It's like, oh, buggery. And then turn 4, he would just come out and just obliterate you. You were like, how did that just happen? Yeah, it was so bewildering. And so that was kind of where a lot of the passivity we talked from earlier came from. And that's kind of been my progression with the game. I did build and paint an AdMech combat patrol. I have 3,000 points of Skaven Sisters. I have 3,000 points of Eldar, 3,000 point Age of Sigmar armies.
Nice.
Sold another Necron army. I've got a bunch of World Eaters. This is terrible. Who lets me do this?
No, you're amongst friends here. Listen,
I have God.
No. I have like I think 4,000 points of Dark Angels Heresy. I've got at least 3,000
That's way
points.
cooler than 40k. Let's be clear on that, right?
Oh yeah.
40k is like this kind of like kind of dorky. Everyone thinks it's cool, which makes it way less cool than it actually is. Like the fact that we think we're the cool guys it makes it so much worse.
You know, I've tried to get Scott to play Heresy because I love it and just the theme of it, and it's really more in the spirit of like having friendly narrative based matches than straight up like do missions, complete secondaries and all that stuff. It's a totally thematic thing which you can totally geek out about and have a lot of fun. But I've got like 4,000 points of Dark Angels. I think I have 3,000 points of Sons of Horus. And I've just added, I think, 2,000 points of Death Guard. So that's my heresy pile. And then Age of Sigmar, I've got Slaves to Darkness, about 2,200 points, I think, maybe a little bit more. And then 2,000 Stormcast easily. And then but none of, bits and pieces are built. Some is built and painted. The Dark Angels are done. So at least the Dark Angels are finished, which is a proud achievement. It only took, when did Heresy come out? Like the 3 years to do it. But and then my 40k armies are
innumerable and vast. The problem is all my stuff's built and painted. That's the problem. That's the problem with being like competent or accomplished or or having severe sort of hyperfixation. It means that everything's done. So I'm like, oh, I'm brilliant. I could buy more stuff. Don't fucking buy more stuff, you idiot. Just play with the stuff you have. But as I say, that's the sort of
nice
the journey of it. But yeah, I mean, I can't overstate it enough. As I say, if it wasn't for the fact that, and I don't just mean to say that kind of Brian checks in and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
If him and I weren't so closely aligned on like kind of sportsmanship and fair play and just being nice guys at the end of the day. And I know that somebody's probably played me out there because it's always going to happen where you have a bad day and you're not on your best like behavior. And I don't mean that in the sense of like I'm coming around the table and smacking the boy's ass. No. I just mean like it's, you're not in the best frame of mind. You slept poorly. The drive was terrible. You've had an argument with your girlfriend, your wife, or your husband, or whoever it may be, and you're just not in the mood. And then something goes wrong. It tips you over the edge. So I don't doubt that I've not been my best self in front of people before. And I do try to apologize when I recognize that. But if it wasn't for Brian and I being so aligned on that as well, that really helps because yeah, the when Brian was a lot more, I guess, tolerant when he got into the game or into
Mhm.
competitive, where folks were a bit of a pain in the arse, and Brian was able to
Right.
kind of just laugh it off. And I can't, I don't have that same gene.
Yeah.
No.
I'm just like, actually, you are a knob, and like, here's why. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not
It's
great
a
when you're
we're a
trapped to
warrior
someone.
race, right?
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
we're a warrior race.
Not me,
So
mate. I couldn't fight sleep. What are you talking about?
No,
Jesus,
but
man.
that's an important thing that you talk about. It's something we've talked about on the podcast, like finding the right, and this sounds really hokey, but finding the right culture for the hobby and the
mhm.
games and finding that in the community is
Yep.
going to make or break whether you actually start to enjoy it or not. Because
Yep.
like there's nothing worse than spending your time like, oh, I painted this up. This is going to be so much fun. And then somebody just shits on your army while you're playing
Mhm.
them. You're like, well,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the
great, thanks.
worst.
And
No.
now we
Yeah.
need to do this for another 2.5 hours. Like, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never, I'll never kind of understand that. And I don't know about yourselves. I mean, you may kind of disagree. My stance is generally speaking that when it comes to sort of Warhammer, there's 1,000 better games out there. From a design perspective, the
Mhm.
game is pretty bad. From a rules updates perspective and a balance perspective,
Mhm.
it's but the fact that we refer to it as the most balanced it's ever been right now, it's
Yeah.
very indicative of how pish it is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if it wasn't for but the hobby and the social side of it is what keeps me coming back to it time after time.
100%.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Completely agree. And I mean, that's a good point because for me, it was getting involved in the local Kingston Horus Heresy community.
Mm.
Great guy named Trevor, and I could play with a couple of other guys, Lucas and Kalen, who really support your hobbying
Yeah.
as well as your gameplay and encouraging you to continue and play games even when you are fumbling through these things.
Mm.
So having a good community is, I totally get what you're saying about Brian and having like good people to play with that keep
Hmm.
you motivated is
Yeah.
always great. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the people you surround yourself with or the community you build around yourself is fairly indicative of the style and person and place you want to be at
Yeah.
with your hobby. I know a few of us were kind of a bit sort of taken aback from 40k or competitive 40k.
Mhm.
I think there's like 6 or 7 of us, and we set up our own little mini tournament. And the idea is whoever comes last gets to pick the game you play next time. You just have to be able
Nice.
to supply models. So we get together once every couple of months, and my buddy Rob makes barbecue, and it's like a little
Awesome.
mini Christmas. You
That's
turn up with
Yeah.
awesome.
something like my buddy plays Eldar, and I painted a
Mhm.
bunch of Eldar. I don't really need them, so I just brought them. There you go, mate. Those are
Yep.
yours now. He brought like a bunch of Sigmar that he doesn't really need anymore. Those are mine now, and I don't know,
That's amazing.
it's a great way to do it. Just
No.
be the kind of change you want to see in the community. It doesn't help
Yep.
to just be like the community sucks,
Yeah.
frowny face. Like,
Yeah.
well, okay, be positive. Like, do
Yep.
something about that. Eh?
Hmm.
I
Um,
really like that. Yeah, no,
mm,
that's I mean that's fantastic. I think that's a great mentality to have, and certainly it's like yeah, everyone benefits from being positive about it,
Yeah.
right?
100%,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And I can say like meeting you at the last tournament, meeting Brian at a few of the
Yep.
tournaments, like you walk the walk. You guys aren't
Hmm.
just like
Mm,
you're not paying lip service to it. You guys are
Yeah,
actually
phew.
you're actually being that change that you say is out there.
Yeah.
So that's really
absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, no, and I mean like yeah, I first obviously Scott put me on to the other guys'
Mm,
podcast, and I loved it. The banter was great. These guys had a lot of fun.
got it. Yeah. Brian
But
Brian
but
doesn't
then
like that I do that, by the way. The
yeah
podcast will get like we were at a tournament and they were like, "Oh, objective markers kindly donated the other guy's
yeah
podcast," and I was like, "Don't listen, it's fucking terrible." And he's like, "Stop doing that."
Stop
I'm
stop
not
it.
gonna
We're
I'm not
trying to get views. Yeah.
I'm like I'm never gonna stop. It's always gonna happen.
No. But you guys, like, you really do walk the walk, and like it was clear. I mean, that last tournament, I left having had a great time.
Yeah.
And it was a good community. You guys were a lot of fun. Those mid table terrors crew, they were a lot of fun.
Mhm.
It was great. Yeah,
Mhm.
the community really does make these things. Absolutely.
So
100%.
when you've been talking about tournaments, you started talking about you're doing TO and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
How did that happen? Because that's a very different aspect of like not playing the game really and not doing the hobby. Like that's the
Yeah,
administratum.
Yeah, so
yeah,
that
that's
that
right.
Yeah, that part.
That
Sucks.
part. Part.
No. It's perfectly fine. So it was actually through Carlos. Carlos is involved with GTA 40K and kind of Keith Davis and those lads. And we talked about RTTs, and at the time, Carlos was running them with another chap, and we kind of talked about it. And one of the big things for me, and I know this isn't necessarily, first of all, shared, and secondly, feasible by everyone, to be clear. I know that Mark Batson, who is a paragon of the community as well, by the way, if you don't know Mark Batson, go to one of his tournaments. It is phenomenal stuff. He's out in Peterborough, which might as well be the fucking
Oh, I've
Serengeti for
heard.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's a bit of a drive for you downtown to
uh,
Peterborough. Yeah.
I've done it a couple of times, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, I've gone through audiobooks like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
Jesus, what? But no, the kind of TO side of it. My kind of stance is that if you organize a tournament, you pick the missions, you decide what is applicable from a rules perspective, you decide what the layouts are going to be, you shouldn't play in it because you have a bunch of knowledge of, for example, you're going to be the one inspecting lists, you're going to be the one submitting your own list. So I don't. Now, obviously, that's not always possible. Sometimes the community is so small that you must play it just to make it the numbers and all the rest of it. I still don't think you should compete in it. But again, I appreciate that I might be in the minority there. And so Carlos and I were talking about that, and the chap who was also running it with Carlos at the time was really looking to play, just wanted to play. And it was like, well, why don't you kind of step back from TOing? You can play, go nuts. And then Carlos and I can kind of run these things and kind of figure that out. And so that's how that kind of transpired. Now Carlos is an encyclopedia when it comes to the rules, and I just kind of follow along at the back of him and nod and smile. But it's funny. A lot of the kind of TO side of it is just trying to make sure you pick, first of all, missions that people are going to enjoy. Like I remember we ran Servo Skulls and everyone moaned like buggery, and then they actually played it and had a bit of a hoot. So it was like, fine, okay, trust us. The other thing is trying to, like, Carlos and I are really, I know it's maybe a bit frowned upon at RTTs for some folks. Carlos and I are really big on hobby, so we do paint score at our RTTs, and the feedback we get is we've had kind of mixed feedback. Some folks say that this is not a stance I necessarily agree with. By the way, some folks say, well, if you do paint score, it's going to discourage people from coming out to their first RTT. To which my reply is typically, if all that separates you is 10 points away from your game, or basically that you can't win the RTT the first time you come out, then maybe that wasn't meant to happen. All that does, in my experience, I said to Carlos, I looked back over the last sort of 6 RTTs we ran, and the only 2 people that had ever showed up unpainted was the chap that used to run it with him, turned up with an entirely unpainted army, and another chap in our local area who I've never even seen prime a model. So we had a bunch of new guys come out, all their stuff was painted, we had a bunch of, and it's not as if we're going around being like, that doesn't have a wash on it. We're like, oh, are you in the process of painting this? Like, actually, yeah, I finished this last night. I know it's not wholly painted. To take 10 points. I don't care. You can have your 10 for painting because I know you are painting it. That's the crucial element, right? We know that you're working on it and you're engaged in the hobby. That's great. Funny story about the TOing side of things, though. People always assume that TOing is having to have this aforementioned encyclopedic knowledge of the latest FAQ and the errata. Well, actually, if Magnus's wing is over a ruin but not in the footprint, and he can see, oh, stop. But it's nothing like that. It just always ends up being questions of like, can this model see this model? And neither player wants to make a decision, and you have to go yes or no. But I remember I walked past the table, for those of you on YouTube who are kind of hearing impaired, that was the walk gesture. And I walked past the table, and 2 chaps were playing, my buddy Watsy and my buddy Nick. And Watsy sort of, all I heard him say was, well, I can't roll 7s, so how am I meant to hit you? And I sort of freeze frame. What did you just say? And it was one of those ones where often you get dropped into the scenario and you have to quickly ascertain whose turn is it, what phase are we in, who's doing what, why are they doing it, what the fuck is going on, have any dice been rolled, you're trying to, it's just information gathering. And my buddy Watsy says, well, I'm overwatching him and he's used lightning fast reaction, so he's -1 to hit, but I can't roll 7s. And I was like, oh, for Christ's sake. It was like, well, first of all, what does Overwatch say? And then having to keep going back, because I don't want to get charged because he's disembarked from a transport that just deep struck. I was like, he can't do that either. Oh, Jesus Christ. And it's trying to unravel the layers of that onion is often your rules interaction. So I would see if you are comfortable and you're personable, do it. TOing an event is great, and you get to kind of chat to people, and it'll make you look up interactions you had no idea existed. And I remember somebody asked me if they could. It was a jump, shoot, jump. Somebody had come out, shot, and they were jumping behind the wall. And I got to the table, and they were already kind of raised voices, ready to go nuts. And you're like, just take 5 seconds, lads.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you trying to do? He's like, I'm trying to overwatch him. It's like, well, you can't overwatch him. It's his shooting phase. And he went, oh yeah. You mean you mean you got to the point of fury over nothing?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing, lads?
Yeah.
So I would, as I say, I would thoroughly recommend it. And it's as I say, it's not this. You don't have to be kind of Zordon from Power Rangers. Great vintage reference there, by the way. You don't have to be that to sort of help out a tournament. You can just go and help and judge, and it's people who run these tournaments would love that kind of thing as well. Just a bit of pressure off you at the end of the day, and it's really, really rewarding.
Cool.
It lets you also be well known in your community as well. Like it makes a big community impact if people feel comfortable just asking you the simplest of questions. It really just builds a rapport, and you get to kind of be a point of contact for new people in the community as well.
That's cool.
I don't know.
I
really
kind of like that.
it.
Yeah,
No, it sounds good. It sounds encouraging. I like your painted rule because for me, what's really helped with on my hobbying side is having goals. So this week I've got a heresy event coming up, and so I'm busy trying to get stuff finished for that. And so tournaments having those rules just encourages you to get work done.
Yep. And it's very rewarding when you put something that you
Absolutely.
finally finished painting on a table and the other guy's thing is beautifully painted. You're like,
Yeah,
well, this is brilliant.
Let's
It's
just
a
take
wonderful
photos.
feeling.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was talking to one of my opponents at the last game. I think it was Ryan with his Gene Stealers. I think that was his name. And I said, it's amazing how just painting it, putting it on the base, and then having a little tuft of grass on there, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, this is a work of art.
It begins to exist in a space and time, right? Which is wonderful. No, I thoroughly enjoy it. It's taken me brilliant stuff. You know, I had to pass an English exam to get in this country. It's taken me a long period of time, and I know that you guys have really seen kind of my Grey Knights, which are painted white. Terrible idea. Don't do that. But it's taken me a long time to discover, like, I don't really care what the box art is. I just really like pink and blue. So most of my stuff is some description of pink and blue. Nice. And I know people are really afraid of putting paint on a model because they don't want it to look bad, and they don't want it to. And as I say at the start of this, like, comparison's the thief of joy. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a shitty Swarm Lord, it's your shitty Swarm Lord.
Yeah.
That's what's more important about it than anything else. And unless you paint and kind of begin to discover your own style, you won't discover what your really good Swarm Lord could look like once you know what you want to do and you love it and you kind of get to grips with it. And that does take time, and that does take making an arse of it a couple of times. But so did everything. Like, you didn't. Just because you, like, what would you have done when you were, I don't know what age you are, I don't own children. Own children, that's a terrible thing to say. I don't have children. But, like, if you were 6 or 8 months old and you didn't want to look a dick trying to learn to walk, would you have just sat down for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
Like, you need to try these things to discover that where you are and where you're positioned with it. And so that's at least what we're trying to do with the hobby side of it, is be like, I don't know, pick up a brush. It could go great. You could love it. I've got a table covered in bloody paints over here. It's fucking horrible. People, somebody came in the other day and they said, "Oh, are you an artist?" I said, "No, I paint wee men." The handyman came over, which wee men is this terrible moniker. She'll never listen to this because she fucking hates me. But my dear mother, she what do you call it? She will occasionally kind of phone me. And she will give me the rundown. Oh, your sister's firstborn, he's doing well and he's walking and he's kind of babbling and stuff like that. and your sister's on her third house now, and 6 bedrooms, all the rest of it. How's your wee men going? Like, don't ever phone me again. Don't ever phone me. Fly a plane into your house, woman. How dare you? And so it's very, very unusual that as I've talked to more and more people, sort of wee men has been picked up as this moniker by which people refer to Warhammer. And the poor guy came in, my HVAC guy came in. He's like, "Oh, are you? Yeah, you're an artist? No, not at all. I just paint this tiny plastic rubbish. It cost me several $1,000s. It's a right
yeah. Oh my God.
It's a really wise investment. I highly recommend it. God almighty.
Well, someone once said, someone was comparing it to like the money when you think about it. You'll spend, say, what is it, $90 to get the new Call of Duty, and you'll play it for maybe a couple months with your pals and whatever, go online. But then usually it kind of fizzles out after 6 months, right?
Yep.
You spend the same money on Warhammer models and then some. But the time investment for your return is that much higher because the hobbying alone takes hours.
Yeah.
And then the games take a couple of hours, and then the whole growing it and experience. So you do get a little bit of bang for your buck in the in the return for that, for sure.
An entertainment investment that you're making. And that's where you get that's the return that you get is, well, I've built it, which was kind of fun or super frustrating, depending on who you are.
Some people hate building.
And then I've painted it to whatever degree that I'm capable of doing it. And now I'm playing with it. And that army is something I can go back to and play
again
for countless years.
Well, I mean, I think my favorite example is if you bought Warp Spiders the day they came out, you've had 30 years of those buggers. You know what I mean?
Like, great point.
What else lasts you for 30? Don't get me wrong, that speaks to how terrible those are getting redone. I'm 99%. That's why I'm not buying them. I have no Warp Spiders, but I'm not bloody buying them. But it's the as you say, the return on investment is fantastic. I mean, let's be clear, not for heresy, unless you really like painting Space Marines. I will have a Night Lord's army if it kills me one day. I will, I promise. But no, I think to go, to be clear, I don't think we kind of skipped it, and I don't think we kind of went away from it too quickly. But I do want to stress again that just the community you surround yourself with is probably my favorite part of this game by far.
Yeah,
because the game's pretty crap, but the community you surround yourself with is it just multiplies everything by 1,000.
Absolutely.
There's a group of you sharing painted models, and there's a group of you playing practice games, and there's a group of you, and you can have there's always that guy in your group, ostensibly for me, Brian, who's playing the kind of absurdly, over the top, sort of broken thing at that point in time. Because he's played CSM for a while until they got nerfed, and now he's back on. Actually, he's doing really well with CSM right now, and they're not in a wonderful position, and Brian's kind of clawing onto them for dear life. Maybe people have got a point. Maybe he is miles better than me. But just being able to rip those practice games and have and be able to. Well, you wouldn't do that, would you? Because we would do this, and you work things out together, and yes, there is this return on investment. You get hours building, painting, and that's really I don't. If you're under the age of about 11, stop listening here. But for me, the hobby is ultimately like masturbation. I prefer to do it on my own, right? But if you engage in that with a group of people painting, then more power to you. But I think people view this as a very kind of lonely hobby, and it's not. It's not even remotely close.
No.
It takes a village, and
absolutely.
I think you get the opportunity to build the one you want.
100%. It's not a hobby. It's not a game or a hobby you can do in a vacuum. I mean, you could try, but your enjoyment is just going to be pathetic. It's going to be non-existent almost. You don't really enjoy it until you get out there and you do something with it, whether it's show it off to other people that have painted it, or you go and this is the thing that we try and encourage, is that get out and play in a local tournament. It doesn't mean that you're playing hyper competitive. It's just you getting some games in there, and when you're out, you'll probably meet some people that are like, oh, hey, we play here every Thursday, or we have this group chat that you can now join and just set up games, and it's just a way to start playing with your toys.
Yeah, no,
Nice one.
it's a great way to do it. And I mean, I remember my first, so Kingston here has a great Warhammer community. And for Age of Sigmar, 40K, Heresy, a lot of good people here playing. Um, and then the first time I went out with Scott to the first critical hit tournament I played in, where it was actually like competitive WTC terrain.
Yep.
People knew these hardcore rules. I was a beginner in like what I felt like was a rep league,
Yeah.
and but it was such a good community that encouraged me to do it again, right? And
Yep.
yeah, I'm into it, man. I'm
Yeah.
totally into it. It's
Mhm.
great
That's it.
fun. It's great fun to get out, get the reps in, and just enjoy myself and get the most out of these things I've
Yeah.
spent all this time and money on. So
And
Yeah,
I'm
well,
look.
me and oh, sorry, all I was going to say is me and
Go.
Big Handsome have a teams tournament coming up on Saturday
oh
and Sunday, and if you get the chance to play a teams tournament, do it. I think have both of you played Brian, or is it only yourself, Scott?
I've only played
Scott's
them.
played Brian. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Played
haven't.
Brian. And obviously just for both of you know this, but for the sake of people listening, neither of you we've not played. Right?
No,
No.
we've never played.
Not yet.
And the problem with me at tournaments and teams tournaments especially is I play very quickly. So on average at teams tournaments, I average about 19,000 steps because my games finish in the blink of an eye, and then I just wander around and just speak to people. I've never met you. What?
Yeah.
Show me your army right now. Where is it?
Yeah,
I got
where
to speak
is
at the last teams tournament I was at. There was a chap there by the name of Lloyd Roberts, and his mum and dad came in, and he was still playing. I went and got a coffee with them. Lovely
Yeah.
people. They're like, "What's this thing he plays?" I'm like, "It's Warhammer. It's shite."
Yeah.
How about you? What have you been up to today?
Yeah.
Swiss Chalet. Let's go for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if you get the chance, do that because it's a right laugh.
That's
Yeah,
what
I've
Brian
heard
was
good
saying.
things.
He was big on it, and he was like, "You got play a teams tournament. It is so much fun." Paul's played one up in Kingston.
Yeah, yeah, but I think it's a different, the one I played was so my wife and I played on a team together. So she brought was it 1,000 points and I brought 1,000 points,
Yeah.
and we were combined together to play. But is the teams tournament you're referring to, is it has more to do with you play an individual game and
You
your
do.
score is collective. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. Now
Okay.
I know Crit Hit has like 30 tables, so they could do a 3-man's tournament. A friend of mine's Derek Townsend. Very weird. I ran into him. I was filming at Mini Wargaming. That makes me sound way more important than I was. Anyone can do that, right? To be clear, you just have to be near fucking Welland.
You just have to be in Welland.
Yeah, you just have to turn up and go, "Hello, I'd like to film this rubbish," and they strap a microphone to you. But I was filming there and I met this guy, Derek, and we just stayed in touch. This makes me sound like a sort of social paragon. I actually am not particularly social. I don't really like people.
Says the guy that gets 19,000 steps.
Yeah.
Hello.
Has coffee with someone's mum and dad. But anyways,
trapped in these situations of my own making. But we stayed in touch, and he did this kind of format, this sort of 3-man team. So it's all the fun of this kind of teams event without the kind of commitment of a 2-day event. Or I know that this WTC style 8-man teams is coming to sort of fruition more and more, and getting 8 people with 2,000 points and that want to go to a 2-day event is bloody hard to put that together. Whereas getting 2 other pals and being like, just want to have a chuckle, throw dice on a table, great, that happens. So the way it works is you draft your pairings, and I've never seen this happen because I just wander away from the table. They have to kind of tie me with reins because I will just leave. And I come back to the table and they're like, "Where the hell are you? Your game started like 10 minutes ago." And I'm, "Oh, my bad." I'm not quite that bad, but I did actually once at the Winter Open. I was playing a lovely chap. I think you may know him, Scott. Chris Gooderham, a Black Templars player, cuts around in the kind of Durham area. Well, I was playing him, and he was playing 80 Black Templars Crusaders or something like that. And I remember I thought, well, that list is going to take ages. I'm using a clock here because I know I'm good for time, but I'm giving him a clock. And the game starts and we deploy our models. And as I think I have first turn and I'm about to move a model, I'm like, I'm going to poo my pants. So I said to him, I was like, "Stick the clock on me. I'll be back the now."
Yeah.
And I came back about 15 minutes later, drenched in sweat. I looked like
Yeah.
that bit when Ace Ventura gets out the rhino.
Yeah.
And I said, and then I was like, right, okay, took my turn. I finished with 40 minutes left, and he finished with no time on his clock.
Wow.
And I was like, I've taken 15 minutes. I've had the time of my
Yeah.
life. It's on Instagram, and it was like, don't
Yeah.
touch this phone. It's disgusting. But yeah, it's a great thing as teams. By the way, it's
Yeah.
a barrel of laughs. Everyone I know. The other thing about it is it's very hard sometimes to turn up to a singles event with a list where you're like, oh, I'm just playing this for fun. Like
Mhm.
3 Lord of Skulls and Angron, right? You turn up to a
Right.
singles event and it might beat something, but you're just like, oh well, great. You know,
Yeah.
it's really hard to do that. Whereas you turn up, you can just be that team that turns up with a bunch of kind of chuckly lists, and
Yeah.
then you're like, oh shit, we might actually win one of these. Like,
Right.
and you've always got a chance because it is just that differential scoring. You just keep things close, and one slips through, and you're like, oh, we won that round. Like, it's unbelievable. There's nothing quite like being the hero of the team because you're the guy who just gets really close scores and doesn't get pissed off when you get fed to
Mhm.
the wolves. Like, I've had that role before. It's not that fun. Like, what are
Yeah.
you bad into? And I'm like, fast melee. And they're like, okay, we're gonna give you 5 fast melee because
Yeah.
all of us hate it as well.
Yeah.
Oh, great. And you just kind of claw not victory, but you claw draws from the jaws of defeat. And how did you get on? Oh, I got a 10-10. I tied.
Mhm.
And your team go, well, that means all of our scores matter now. And so, like, it's more important that you're the guy who does that sometimes than you're the guy that wins a big game.
Oh, that's cool.
So no,
That's
if you
fun.
get the chance, or if there's
Yeah.
a 3 man's event,
Mhm.
obviously, Paul, you're out in sort of Kingston, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
miles away.
Yeah.
It's not that far. It's not that
It's not
far
that
away.
bad.
No,
It's
no.
not
We
that bad.
Brian and I once drove to like Petawawa after a game of
Yeah,
hockey at like 10 at night.
I heard that.
That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that was. But I've got the like phone, and Brian's like, "What turn do I take?" I'm like, "Take a right." It's fucking snowing. Take a right.
Yeah.
Takes a left. Well, brilliant, Brian. Well, we're lost forever now. Great. Thanks, mate. Arsehole. We arrived in Petawawa like hours later, and he's like, "Oh, I should have took the right." I know you should have. That's how satellite navigation works. Oh God! And the backwards, I'm like, we're gonna die here. I'm gonna have
Oh
to eat
yeah.
them.
Petawawa's far. It's way
Oh,
up there. Yeah.
yeah,
But it's got a big Warhammer community for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
For
What?
sure.
So I know obviously Scott, you're playing Votan for just
Yeah.
now, and Paul, are you Necrons dedicated or what's the scoop?
You know what? I'm inspired. I'm definitely Necrons for the next one. I was tempted, the nerd in me wanted to be like, oh, it's Emperor's Wrath, and there's a picture of the lion, and I've got Dark Angels, but I'm like, you know what? I've started the Necrons thing. It was the first time I'd ever played them
Mhm.
outside of like home games with Scott or with family, and so I'm having chatted with you. I'm like, I think I'll stick with them for the rest of this year. I like that. No, man, I like that idea. I like
Mhm.
Mm.
I like the idea of like getting the reps in, knowing an army,
Mm.
knowing a faction, getting the rules down, focusing on the hobby on for one
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of faction for a change instead of bouncing all over the place
Yeah.
like a rubber ball in a room.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm inspired. I think I'm gonna stick with them. And I had a great time playing them, to be
Yeah.
honest. It
They
was
seem a
fun to
hoot. They seem
play.
like such fun.
Mhm.
And that hypercrypt lets me do some of that up and down stuff, right? That you talked about, which is fun to do, right?
Yeah, Hypercrypt can do bind and deploy
Yep,
quite well,
quite
especially
easily.
because you have a lot of stuff that's quite throwaway.
Yep,
The best thing I can score behind with is like an 110-point unit, and let me
yeah,
tell you, when that dies, it upsets me.
yes.
I get
Yeah,
very. I'm like, oh well, there goes 5%. My calculation is always there goes 5% of my army, and it
yes,
scored more than 5% of my points. Double thumbs up.
right. Yeah,
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I'm gonna focus on Necrons, I think, for the rest of this year.
Mhm.
And
Nice.
then probably pick up something new maybe in January.
Yeah, well, especially once we get back to books and a couple of more launches again, right? I think that'll be a good
Yeah,
Yeah.
place for it to be.
yeah.
And you sticking with Votan, Scott? You're
I
here,
am sticking
hero.
with Votan. I want to get
Good
better.
man.
I want to just
Mhm.
really something that you said earlier is really something that I've been trying to do
Mm.
is I want to be able to get better at the game regardless of the army. So I really
Yeah,
that's why I'm going to stick with them because I haven't been doing great with them,
Mm.
but by God, I want to get better at the game. I don't
Yeah.
really care so much about my win rate, so much as I'm like, okay, at least if I start to close the gap on a lot of the games, then I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm seeing progression here, and
Yeah.
I'm getting better.
Yeah,
And then,
fundamentally getting better
yeah,
at the game,
Hmm.
yes,
because that's applicable to every faction you play if you're
yes,
just
Yep.
better at the game.
yeah,
Yep.
So no, that's really cool. I mean, unless you play tabletop simulator, Paul, I can't extend
No.
this olive branch. But if you want to play Game Scott, I'd be more than happy to.
that'd be awesome.
Um, but no, I'm tabletop simulator was an unfortunate part of my development in playing 40k. I still do it now. I still like it. It's a great little tool, but people hate it. But I
Yeah.
quite enjoy it.
I've never,
Um,
I've never played it
There's definitely a tactical benefit to it. Absolutely. I mean, learning the rules and getting the reps in without having to leave your home and
yeah.
organize schedules and stuff like that. It definitely it is tempting.
The problem is there's no threat of kind of physical violence, so people tend to
Yeah, it takes all the fun out of it.
people tend to be people. You play randoms, and you're like, you
Yeah.
are an arsehole, and I don't think you
Yeah.
would be this if I was
If
near
we were
if
face
I
to
was in
Yeah.
face.
striking distance. I don't think it would be like this.
Yeah.
So you need to find a good group to play it with, but
Yeah,
it's
for
you need to
sure.
you need to treat it as a tool, if it's something
Yeah.
you want to learn it and
Mhm.
kind of get better with. Because I know people hate it, but it's because it removes a lot of the agency. You roll the
Yeah.
dice and you feel like, well, I rolled those. Those are
Yeah.
my results. And you
Yeah,
click a button that says roll dice. And you're like, look what this has
Yeah.
done to me. It's like
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
same thing.
It's the
Like
yeah,
same thing.
realistically, it's the
It is
same bloody thing.
random.
But
Yeah.
it is what it is. But no, I'm glad to hear you guys are having such a hoot at Critical Hit,
Yeah.
and I'm glad to
yeah.
see where it's come from, especially given kind of some of my early experiences there.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's always cool to see. I think so something when Brian was the one who really wanted to do the podcast in the first
Mhm.
place, the other guys, and I remember I said something along the lines to him like, the world doesn't need to hear the opinions of two more kind of middle-aged white guys, right? I say middle-aged, Brian's fucking ancient, significantly older than me. I'm just a handsome young 35-year-old something,
Yeah.
35, Jesus Christ, when did that happen? But yeah, I mean, I think podcast mics should be like guns. You know what I mean? You should have a
Yeah.
license to buy one. Just people spouting drivel into a microphone. But when, he was kind of no. I think we should do it. I think we should do it. And yeah, thank you guys for starting a pod because there's nothing that I like listening to more than 40k that affects my community. I
Yeah.
don't give a shit what Art of War have to say about the
Yeah.
latest. How good is Bringers of Flame and Vanguard
Yeah.
Tactics can tell me how to deploy my Tyranid list from now until the
Mhm.
cows come home. I don't give a shit. But what I do
Mhm.
care about is hearing people in my local community talk about the game and how it affects them. That's
Yeah.
significantly more valuable than anything else.
I couldn't
Thank
agree
you.
more because I mean, certainly that's what drew me to your guys' podcast because it became my number one listen because I'm like, these guys are talking about Peterborough, they're talking about Toronto tournaments, they're talking about tournaments in Scott's backyard. I'm
Yeah.
like, these are local players
Yeah.
Mhm.
talking, these are
The local game.
the
Yeah.
local guys. This is our scene.
Yeah.
So I love
Mhm.
that,
Yeah.
and immediately, yeah, totally got into it. If we could just before we wrap any of this up,
Yeah.
you mentioned Age of Sigmar armies. Are you playing it as well?
I am. So I'm playing.
Nice,
I'm in an escalation league at the moment, just while I build
brilliant,
up some bits and bobs. I have a couple of thousand points of Flesh Eater Quartz. I have several
nice.
thousand points of
Nice.
Sylvaneth because I like being an annoying bastard that moves around the place.
Yeah.
It turned out actually that was kind of interesting from Votan. I thought I was a guy who really liked to kind of stand and bang and take hits and shoot
Yeah,
back and be very deadly. And then I played Grey Knights and was like, oh no, I just like moving places.
yeah,
That's all I really I like being fast and moving
yeah,
places. And I've got Caradron Overlords because I just kind of like dwarfy things.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also being the shooty faction in a melee game
Mhm.
seemed kind of fun.
Yeah.
So no, I had an escalation league game last night, and one of my goals, which I don't have a lot of time to achieve it in 3 months till bloody Christmas. But I will get to an Age of Sigmar RTT before this year ends.
Yeah,
I will do it. I will have a painted army. I will attend one. It will not be a good army, and I will go 0-4. And I don't care. I'm just
yeah.
gonna do it.
Just play.
That's
Yeah.
great.
That's
We did
great.
I did like a welcome to fourth, and that's what
Nice.
got me into it. Because the local Kingston community hosted a welcome to fourth and 1,000 point, bring what you got. kind of tournament. Had a blast. Really love the game right
I
now.
think my buddy played in that. Chap in my was it Kingston Gaming Nexus you played
It
at?
was, yeah.
So I think a friend of mine's by the name of Rich played in that.
Nice.
Richard Smith. It seems like such a made up name.
It's totally made up.
It's terrible.
He's
eh?
in witness protection.
Yeah.
His name's Richard Smith.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I dread to think, to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a son,
Yeah.
Richard. Like, who fucking did that? Change his name right now.
What did he play? What faction did he play? Do you know?
Yeah, Gloomspite gets. He has just a bunch of trolls and Troggoths and all that kind of stuff.
I think. Are they like fluorescent painted?
Yes.
So Janet played him.
Well,
my wife played him, and he was a great guy. Super.
Oh,
she
you're
was
more than
learning the
welcome
rules.
to tell me it was an arsehole.
No. Nothing but good things to say about him. She had a lot of fun playing him, and he had all the patience in the world with helping her work through the rules and everything like that. So it's brilliant. No, and there's a good Age of Sigmar community here.
Great.
Very friendly.
I'm really glad to hear it.
So I'm really excited to. I think there's a league starting out here that I'm looking forward to joining.
It's a fun game, especially when you speak to people who really love 9th and 8th edition 40k, and then they talk about Sigmar as if it's this kind of simplified version, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
No,
there's so much complexity and depth in that game if you just give it the time, and I really hope that more people do because it's fantastic fun.
Yeah, and the models are stunning.
I will get into it at some. Oh, it's definitely got the better models. 100%.
100%. Nobody can. It's undeniable. Remember, was it the Stormcast came out, and then a week later they were like, "Look at these Blood Angels," and everyone was like,
"Who cares?
Those are terrible. Like, what is that?" It felt like in Shallow Hal when the lassie's really big, and they're all like, "Oh God." I don't think anyone looked at that and thought that's brilliant. That looks good. It's terrible. Sigmar's brilliant.
Do you have that Flesh Eater Court? What's that named character? He's the big guy.
Usharan.
Yeah,
I do. I actually very recently painted him, and brilliant. He's brilliant. He actually, I love the lore. Just derailed this, by the way. It's a Sigmar podcast.
No. It's everything. It's everything. It's always been an everything.
Warhammer podcast.
It's a Warhammer podcast.
No, I love the fact that I love that their lore is just based. And I'm not a big lore guy, by the way.
Right.
Brian likes the audiobooks and all the rest of it. I have a problem with 40k and Warhammer in general. And I do like to read, but it has this terrible sense of scale where they're like, we need to save this planet, or like 4 million people are going to die. Right. And you're like, oh my God, that sounds awful. And they're like, but we've got 6 billion. And it's like, well, does it matter? I don't know anymore. You've lost me. But I like the lore for the Flesh Eater Courts, where in their head they're all these like nobles cajoling in these courts.
I love how twisted that is.
And Usharan's like a paladin. It's like, what is this? This is brilliant.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
No, I really like it.
No, it's very cool. It's very cool.
So
hopefully,
will you be talking about it? Will you be talking about it more as you? Will you branch out the other guys a bit and throw in some AOS?
Yeah, hopefully. I think one of the things that's been really helpful for us on the podcast was kind of that when I took a little kind of break from playing 40k, which is, by the way, to be clear, very healthy. Don't feel like you need to keep playing. If you're not enjoying the thing, step back from it. It's not going anywhere. Right, step back from it, because I know there's some people who feel like they must keep. They're like, I will enjoy this. It's like, you're not going to make yourself enjoy it. You're not, you're not 5 years old forcing yourself to eat mushrooms until you enjoy them. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to enjoy this if you just keep bashing away at it. Take time away from it. When I took time away from it, Brian and I being able to do the podcast where only he had gone to a tournament and we were able to kind of bounce off one another, has certainly led to a bit more confidence in doing that in the podcast, where if I go to a Sigmar tournament, Brian can ask some fantastic questions because he didn't go. He doesn't really know the game. So we get to chat back and forth about that. So hopefully I will go to one. I can't promise I'll take Flesh Eater Courts because being able to sprint from tree to tree with Sylvaneth. Do you know they used to do a thing where were like 6 guys with swords would run out of a tree and smash your face in, and then on a 2-up before you hit them back would just leave.
Jump back in.
What is that? Oh no, I'd have had to. If somebody tried that with me, I think I would have had to have assaulted them there and then.
You'd be like, what?
Yeah, I'm not doing this. Sorry,
this is made up.
My golden rule, or one of my golden rules when I first started playing, was if ever you get to a table and you ask someone what their list does, and their introduction to their list begins with okay, this is a bit jank. Okay, you're gonna have a bad day.
Yeah.
When someone's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a bit tricky, the rule kind of says this. You're like, can you just play normal war?
Yeah.
My first tournament, a guy put like a big Contemptor dreadnought in front of a wall, and then
Right.
behind the wall was the bodyguard. And he
Hmm.
was like, well, you actually have to shoot the bodyguard because they're technically closer, but you can't shoot the bodyguard, so you can't shoot the dreadnought. And the dreadnought
Oh,
just proceeded to leaf blower me. And I was like,
No.
what is this? Are you
yeah.
serious? So I'm glad that the rules are a bit clearer now, or maybe I'm a bit
Yes.
clearer on the rules, or maybe it's a combination of the both. Um, if you ever see me at a tournament and I talk to you about buying Thousand Suns, by the way, don't let me shoot
Don't.
me before I do it. Just don't allow it to happen, because I know that
Fair enough.
whenever I enter a hobby store with a budget, I go around it with all the anxiety of a man being hunted for sport.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so don't let me do it. I don't want to paint rubrics because I will.
No,
So,
because I'll do it.
that's
Oh,
amazing.
dearie me.
But it's been great though.
Yeah, this has
Oh,
been a
thank you very much for
fantastic.
having me. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. It's been really great to. It's very cathartic to chat through the trials and tribulations of trying to be sort of Brian Silver medal.
Oh, that's not true. That's not true at
Oh
all.
dear. No one likes when you get. No one likes that joke, and I do it all the time.
That's great.
Well, this has been a
Oh,
lot of fun. Is there any tournaments coming up that you want to plug or that you're taking part in or TOing or anything like that?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're in the Toronto area or you are nearby, we are running the Toronto Fall Open October 19th and 20th. We would love to see you there. It's a 2-day event, full WTC terrain, and 6 games, 4 day 1, 2 on day. Sorry, 4 games day 1, 2 games day 2. So if you're coming from out of town, you're getting out of Toronto by like 3 o'clock, right? We want to make sure that
Brilliant.
everyone gets home in
Mhm.
plenty of time. And of course, everyone's really motivated day 1. And
Mhm.
then day 2, you just want to get your games over and get out of the place. Like no one wants to be huffing 40k farts day 2 when they're like 1 and 3.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of idea, right? And we would really, really love to see you guys there, or anyone who has the opportunity to come down. It's a new space. There's going to be several tournaments ongoing at the same time. I think there's like a 30-person old world tournament. There's some open
Very
gaming
cool.
space and all that kind of stuff. So it'd be absolutely great. I'll be patrolling the lower tables because that's I hate the phrase lower tables, but I'll be patrolling those, answering rules questions such as what is a movement value and is this a wall?
How do I
Yeah.
how do I
Yeah.
roll a 7 on an
Yeah.
Overwatch?
On a six-sided die.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy a 7-sided dice and start freaking people out.
Yeah.
But no, I'd love to see anyone who can possibly make it there, because the more the merrier,
Brilliant.
right? And it should be a pile of laughs.
I will definitely
Fantastic.
be there. I've signed up for
Yeah.
it. First 2-day tournament that I'll be taking part in, and
Nice.
I will be making sure my Votan are painted 100% for it and
I
everything.
will bring you coffee day 2. I promise that.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
No
And
problem. Thank you
Thank
for
you so
having me.
much.
yeah.
Been great.